So I was at the 2023 Toronto International Film Festival, and I had a lot of fun. It's my favorite film festival. I saw a lot of great movies, so let's talk about them right about now. The first film I saw was Anatomy of a Fall. This is a crime mystery drama about a woman who tries to prove her innocence after her husband's death. It premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, where it won the Palme d'Or, which is the top prize. And personally, I thought this movie was pretty great. Much of this film functions as a courtroom drama, but it feels so much smarter than your average one of those. It was very intelligent in how things were shown or not shown, and the way that information was withheld or revealed didn't feel overly cliched or manipulative. We don't really know anything about this couple before the initial incident, and the film uses the criminal investigation as an excuse to investigate their relationship. And as these things get explored, the film proves to be very smart and thoughtful. It's a very honest depiction of a couple, showing very real and relatable types of struggles and people. I also really love the style of this film. It is well directed with some great shots and some really interesting and unique perspectives. There are points in the film where it would follow a character that is not the direct focus of the scene, and it serves as a great reminder as to what their perspective in that moment would be like. I also really love the music in this film and the way it was used. There's several instances of imperfectly played piano that is used diegetically but also over top of other scenes. And when we do see the piano being played, it looks very accurate, which I always appreciate. Having a character play piano, and especially imperfectly, and then using that over top of other scenes adds a really unique and interesting tone. It works really well for the film, and I love how it came together. The performances in this film were all really fantastic. Sandra Hüller does a phenomenal job as the lead. I'm sorry if I butchered that name. I try my best. Sometimes it's difficult to understand what I'm even supposed to be saying, but whatever. And the way that the film is written gives a lot of opportunity for her to really shine and captivate the audience with her performance. The child actor that plays the son in this film is also fantastic. There are so many directors that get away with not spending the proper amount of time with child actors to get the right performance out of them, but it seems like the film's director, Justine Triet, really cared. One of my criticisms of this film is that there are some overly cheesy characters in the courtroom scenes. Like, one guy was just really obviously cast as a villain type, but aside from that, this film feels very grounded and genuine. One other criticism is that this film probably could have been about 15 minutes shorter. At 2 hours and 30 minutes, it's still really engaging and captivating, but there were definitely parts that could have been trimmed out to help the pace. Honestly, while watching this film, it felt as though it would have functioned very well as a 3-part miniseries. Regardless, I really loved this film, and I'm excited to catch it again. It looks like Neon is planning for a limited release in North America on October 13th, so mark your calendars and check this one out whenever you can. And I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10. It's closer to a 9 than a 7. Next, I saw Perfect Days, directed by acclaimed German director Wim Wenders. It's probably Wim Wenders. It's German. Oops. The film stars Koji Yakusho as a man who cleans toilets in Tokyo, and he has a particular fascination for classic rock music that he listens to on cassette in between jobs. Now, naturally, with him listening to a lot of classic rock, that winds up making its way into the soundtrack, and that provides a really interesting experience, especially with the setting being Japan. This is very much a vibe movie in the sense that it's less about the narrative and more about the feeling. It is more about being sensory than it is necessarily about telling a story, and it still does kind of tell a story, but it's mostly a series of encounters. The main character doesn't really talk, but he's still interesting and enjoyable to follow. And Koji Yakusho's performance is really great. I should mention that this film won him Best Actor at Cannes. For the majority of the film, his performance is reserved, but somehow also simultaneously expressive. There's a lot of subtleties in his performance, and his emotions are really well communicated. Now, unfortunately, a lot of the other characters' performances don't hold up nearly as well. Some of their performances feel pretty wooden, and this might just be a symptom of the language barrier, who knows. There was a lot of effort put into the Foley work, and there's a lot of sounds working together simultaneously. There were some moments where the Foley sounds felt a bit too high in the mix, but overall I really appreciated what they were going for. This is a very calm, relaxing, and digestible movie with a great soundtrack and really good vibes. There are parts that are funny, and parts that are cute, and parts that feel almost meditative. Sure, there's points where I felt as though the soundtrack was definitely doing a lot of the lifting, and personally I would have preferred this film to be closer to 90 minutes than 2 hours, but overall this was a very nice watch with a likable character to follow throughout. So if this sounds interesting to you, then check this one out whenever you can, and I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10. Another film I saw was Fallen Leaves, directed by Aki Kaurismäki. This film won the jury prize at this year's Cannes Film Festival, and the only thing I knew going into this movie is that this director has a bunch of films that are on my watch list. This was a very interesting and bizarre movie. There are very clearly intentional comedic elements within this film, and some might even call it a comedy, but it's not so explicitly comedic to the point where it feels like a Wes Anderson movie. At points, the tone actually reminded me of Roy Andersson films, but it's not necessarily that close either. This film exists as its own thing, and it was kind of fun to figure out exactly what it was going for as it progressed, and not in any kind of frustrating or incomprehensible way, but in a really thoughtful and contemplative way. To me, this movie was more interesting than funny, but it still was pretty funny. I honestly feel as though I would have benefited from seeing this movie in a packed crowd of regular film goers and not critic/industry people, because there were quite a few points where I feel as though crowd laughter in my environment would have been pretty appropriate. This film is shot in a very uncanny, amateurish 70s style, and it actually really worked with the film, not only with the tone, but also with the underlying messages and ideas it's trying to get across. There are modern elements of this film that very clearly and intentionally clash with this style, and that really adds to both the comedic and interesting nature of this film. This is a movie that really grew on me over the course of the film's 81-minute runtime and even after. I was not sure what to think at first, but by the end of it, I really loved it. Also, there's a song near the end of the film that's just a fucking banger. This was a really fun and interesting watch that I would love to watch again at some point soon. It looks like Mubi is giving this a limited theatrical release on November 17th, so mark your calendars and check this one out whenever you can. And I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10. It's closer to an 8 than a 6. Another film I saw was The Contestant. This is a documentary about the infamous Japanese game show A Life in Prizes, where one man known as Nasubi had to survive solely off of his winnings from magazine sweepstakes. He got put in a room with no clothes and no food, and entered a bunch of sweepstakes, and eventually won prizes over a very long time. And I don't really want to go into too much detail, but essentially they really just exploited and tortured this guy. This is something that I was vaguely aware of, and there are many YouTubers who covered this story, but I never really did a proper deep dive into this subject, so this documentary coming out was actually perfect for me. I was honestly waiting for some kind of comprehensive, well-produced summary of the show using the best quality footage available, and this movie delivered on that and more. It not only served as a digestible feature-length summary of the show, but they also managed to get interviews with both Nasubi and the original show's producer, who unsurprisingly comes off as kind of a sociopath. Like, he kind of loves that he did something so unethical. He's kind of just bragging about it the entire time. This was the perfect subject matter to cover in documentary form, although one of the reasons why we've never gotten this until now is because the subject matter does present itself with quite a few challenges. With the style in which this original Japanese show was presented, there's a lot of text all over the screen in many different places, so the process of subtitling this film is one that required a pretty unique approach. Essentially, they completely digitally removed the original Japanese text and replaced them with English text that matches the style. It was definitely a choice that added to the film's budget and production, but it really paid off. Now, unfortunately, there is one translation-related choice that I did not love, and that choice was having Fred Armisen being the voiceover dub for the original show's narrator. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand why you would want to dub that material, especially considering we already have subtitles for what Nasubi is saying. The creators of the film explicitly stated that they wanted to recreate the experience of the original Japanese television show for English audiences, and that's why the choice to have Fred Armisen do this is confusing. His voice does not match the tone of the original show's narrator at all, and in this film it sounds like he's narrating for a children's program. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's the tone that the original show was going for. Listening to clips of the original show, it sounds like a Japanese game presenter, not a children's show host. So yeah, that was pretty annoying and irritating, and I honestly thought it was going to ruin the movie for me, but I got used to it pretty quick. It's really the only issue I had with the film, which is otherwise super entertaining. This is a really professionally made and well put together documentary that is simultaneously hilarious and terrifying. I experienced a variety of emotions, and I was pretty much always glued to the screen. This was a great subject to cover, and from what I can tell, for the most part, they really did it justice. It is undeniably captivating, and I cannot wait to see it again. So check this one out whenever you can, and I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10. Another film I saw was The Boy and the Heron. This is the newest final film of Hayao Miyazaki, and I mean that he's had quite a few final films over the years, and this is one of them. Now, The Boy and the Heron is actually the international title for this film, with the original Japanese title translating to How Do You Live? I honestly prefer the original title because the international title makes it seem like it's kind of a kid's movie, which is probably what they want marketing-wise, but I feel as though it's kind of deceptive. It is not a kid's movie. There's blood and stuff, mature things that happen. It's not a kid's movie. Don't bring your kids to the movie. Now, obviously, with this being the new Ghibli Miyazaki film, there is a lot of hype surrounding it. It was a very hot ticket at the festival, and it was difficult for people to get their hands on them despite it having several showings. They sold out really quickly, and there's obviously a large and passionate Miyazaki fan base, and if you consider yourself one of those people, then you'll probably get exactly what you want out of this film. It's more of the same. I don't consider every single one of his movies to be a masterpiece. There are some that don't really interest me, and there are some that I really love. There's also quite a few that I have not seen and am looking forward to. Anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm not exactly a super fan or anything, and to me, the overall experience of this film was kind of underwhelming. Now, don't get me wrong, there are technical and creative elements to this film that are pretty incredible. I really enjoyed the unique approach to the animation style in the fire sequences, and even outside of those sequences, the animation really stands out. They really put a lot of thought into the weight and physics of the animation. There's a shot of characters entering a vehicle, and you can see the entire thing move as their weight is being redistributed. There's a careful attention to detail that I really do appreciate. The character design is also really fantastic. Every time this film showed a weird new character design was a moment that really stuck with me. The imaginative qualities of this film are what it truly excelled at, and I just wished there was more of it. Like, this movie is over 2 hours, and it really does not make up much of it. And of course, these imaginative qualities are all throughout the trailer, but in the actual film, it doesn't really take up that much of it. Like, there are random creatures that just show up only to be on screen for a bit, and it barely ties into the overall narrative. In terms of story, there was a lot that just really didn't feel like it mattered at all. There was a lot of nonsense and dicking around, and it was all more or less interchangeable. What I wound up realizing about this movie is that just like Perfect Days, this is very much a vibe movie. The experience of this movie is less about the narrative and more about the feeling. If you like the feeling of other Ghibli movies, then you will like the feeling of this one. But what kind of bothers me about this movie is that unlike Perfect Days, this is not nearly as honest about what it is. It very much pretends to be a movie that has a story. It's just not really a great story, so what's left is the feeling. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying this movie for that feeling, but I needed something more. This film had absolutely no business being over 2 hours long. It was incredibly difficult to care about anything happening past the 30-minute mark, and aside from some key snapshot trailer moments of introducing new imaginative character designs, the overall experience of this movie for me felt relatively pointless. Again, there is incredible animation, and there are moments of this film that really stuck with me. I also thought the music was at points pretty incredible, but even though I can appreciate the talent and craftsmanship that went into making this film, it unfortunately was not really for me. So check this one out if you want. A lot of people are calling this a masterpiece, and who knows, your taste might align more with them than with me. As for me, all things considered, I thought this was fine, and I'm giving this one a 6 out of 10. It's closer to a 5 than a 7. It's a very low 6. I am being very generous with this 6. I almost changed it to a 5, so you're welcome. Another movie I saw was Dream Scenario. This is from writer-director Christopher Borgli, who made Sick of Myself, a 2022 dark comedy that I also very much recommend. This newest film stars Nicolas Cage and is produced by Ari Aster and A24, and this is a very fun and at times pretty hilarious movie. Now, the last Nicolas Cage movie I saw before this one was Sympathy for the Devil, and I've got to say Dream Scenario was really refreshing because this is a movie where he clearly cared about the performance. I love that he's actually playing a character in this film, and unlike Sympathy for the Devil, his performance in this film is actually really consistent. In terms of his performance, this is honestly up there with his best films. His character is delightfully awkward and neurotic, and his overall presence in the film is very entertaining. This is also maybe the only movie I've ever seen where Michael Cera is actually playing a character. Like, he's doing something other than the awkward teenager kind of thing, and it worked. All you had to do was just not typecast him. This movie also has Tim Meadows, who I love. Really great cast overall. I also love this film's concept. Essentially what happens is Nicolas Cage's character starts appearing in other people's dreams and no one knows why, so he kind of becomes a celebrity overnight. It's a really great script and I love what it was able to explore. It is very much aware of its own absurdity and the characters feel properly motivated. It also uses the concept as a good excuse to show different filming styles. There are many different dreams that are shown in this film, and each was an excuse to show something creative. Overall, I really loved the style of this film and the way it was shot, although it seemed as though an unusual amount of this film was a bit out of focus. It didn't ruin the movie for me, but it was noticeable. I also really enjoyed the music in this film. There was a piano piece near the end of the film that I really loved. Overall, this was a very enjoyable experience. It's always satisfying to see a new movie with a great concept that's explored thoroughly and delightfully. I loved the character writing in this film, and honestly, there's a scene in this movie that's probably the funniest I've seen all year. Anyway, I thought this was pretty great, so check this one out when it gets a limited release on November 10th. I guess I should mention that the song choice in the trailer that A24 just released is not the best one they could have used. It doesn't really reflect the tone of the film, so yeah, just pretend that song's not there, I guess. Anyway, it was great. Go see it. Thank you. And I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10. Another film I saw was The Zone of Interest. This is from writer-director Jonathan Glazer, who made Under the Skin and Birth and Sexy Beast. This newest film is set during the Holocaust, and it is a refreshing and unique take on the genre. Without spoiling anything, this is probably the least exploitative Holocaust film I've ever seen. In a genre that sometimes can feel like gratuitous tragedy porn, this is a film that really forces you to engage with the subject on an intellectual level. I genuinely love films where there's an actual artistic purpose towards what's being shown and what's not shown, how things are shown. I love films that break the norm and do things differently, and I especially love films that do so in a sensible way that really pays off. In many ways, you could call this film experimental. This film is not just about what you see and hear, it's about engaging with and understanding why it's presented in this way. This is a deeply resonating film that will have you thinking about it long after it's over. The performances in this film were fantastic. The cinematography is also pretty incredible. This is the same cinematographer that worked on Ida and I'm Thinking of Ending Things. This is an incredibly visually well-presented film, and I can easily remember specific shots clear as day. Many of the sequences in this film are filmed in real time with multiple cameras, so the actors are really able to perform naturally with each other over the course of a scene. Part of the filming style reminded me of one of my favorite films, Jean Dielman, where many of the interior shots of this film wind up reusing the exact same angles later. It provides a really fantastic and clear sense of continuity, and seeing these same angles under different lighting conditions and contexts keeps the visual style of this film looking fresh. It is an absolutely beautiful looking film, and I genuinely love the visual style. It is unique and interesting, it takes risks, and it really pays off. The score for this film is also incredible. It was composed by Mika Levi, who also did the score for Under the Skin and Jackie. She created a powerful sound with such a commanding presence. As soon as the music started in this film, I knew I was in for something incredible. It immediately emotionally affected me, and I was pretty much just frozen in one place listening. It's also very sparingly used, which, despite how incredible it sounds, is honestly the right choice. Anyway, I absolutely loved this film, and I cannot wait to see it again. It was genuinely incredible, and I'm sure I'll get even more out of it on a second watch. So check this one out as soon as you can. It's getting a limited release on December 8th, and I'm giving this one a 9 out of 10. Another film I saw was The Settlers. This is a Chilean film that I didn't really know too much about before going into it, other than it had some buzz at Cannes. It was getting pretty good reviews, and the promotional clip that they posted I thought looked pretty good. The style of this film is very clearly Western inspired. It's shot in a 4:3 aspect ratio, and it looks pretty good. This film is well shot overall, and I do enjoy the visual style. I also really enjoyed the music. It had a great tone, and it felt inspired by Ennio Morricone. And unfortunately, aside from those aspects, the rest of this movie was just disappointing. The acting coming from the English-speaking characters wasn't that great, and it really did not seem as though it was doing that in a satirical way. The story and characters are also just so obvious and one-dimensional. The entire narrative experience, unfortunately, just felt really basic and unspecial. There are also many points in this film where the music was used inappropriately. The music on its own is great, but there are so many instances where its usage in the film felt unearned. It often felt as though it was trying to insist an emotion that wasn't there, and the film often felt as though it was forcing some sort of implied significance. Much of this film feels as though it's confused in its tone, and there are scenes within this film that definitely work on their own, but these scenes don't really come together cohesively in service of the entire piece. There's also not one but two scenes in this movie that felt really pointless and gratuitous, and the second one was one that felt as though we were supposed to feel cathartic about it, as if it was some sort of necessary vengeance, like, oh yeah, they're getting now. Very bizarre, and it did not work very well at all. This movie also contained something that I consider to be a pretty big pet peeve of mine, where a character is choking another character, and you can see in the frame that their hands are just resting on the other actor's throat. They're not applying any pressure, which, duh, you don't want to actually kill the actor, so you shouldn't be applying pressure. So then don't show their hands on their throat. Just imply it. Move the frame slightly higher. Fucking crop it. Or if you've got the time and budget for it, build a prosthetic. Build a fake neck that the actor can actually choke. The Coen brothers did this in 2007, and I'm sure there are other examples. So I don't understand why so many movies just default to having the actors resting their hands on the other actor's throat. I can tell they're not being choked. Either don't show it or build a prosthetic. Don't show something that's obviously implied to be something other than what you're showing. I will complain about this until people stop doing it. It bothers me a lot. It doesn't seem like that difficult of a fix when the solution is to just not show it. Just don't show it. What are you doing? Anyway, this movie was fine. Like I said, I enjoyed the look of it. It's also the director's first feature, and in that sense, it's pretty good, honestly. But yeah, unfortunately, it was just way too basic, and the elements of the film that did work didn't come together very well at all. So check this one out if you want. It got good reviews from some other people, I guess. Some parts were interesting, but I'm gonna forget about this movie pretty quick. And I'm giving this one a 4 out of 10. It's closer to a 5 than a 3. Another film I saw was Hitman, the newest from director Richard Linklater, where Glenn Powell plays a man going undercover to catch people who are trying to hire a hitman. Now, Richard Linklater's films are kind of all over the place in a way. He often has a drastically different approach between his films in terms of how they're produced. This newest film of his is first and foremost a comedy, and it really feels as though it's one of the more accessible and crowd-pleasing films in his filmography. With the main character going undercover, this film uses the opportunity to showcase a variety of performances from the lead, Glenn Powell. And honestly, his performances are genuinely fantastic. It's all done with a fitting sense of self-awareness. There are scenes in this movie that feel like it's just master of disguise, but not terrible. Each of the characters in this film are memorable and fun to watch. Everyone's motivations feel justified, and there's an extra layer of psychology in this film that felt very smart and fitting for the story. It really delves into the concept of identity and your true self, and the idea that everyone is essentially just playing a character anyway. It's fun to think about, and it works for the film both practically and thematically. I loved this film's sense of humor. It was very funny, and I was laughing genuinely throughout. It is generally clever and well shot. The only aspects that had me temporarily taken out of the movie were some moments where some characters were doing some things that I was like, why would you do that? And it was kind of just like, you're just letting that happen by doing this. But it didn't ruin the movie, and honestly, honestly, the situations that resulted from that were well worth it. It was clear that it wasn't just some lazy way to figure out how to wrap up the movie. They instead used it to set up a very compelling dynamic and a hysterically thrilling sequence of events. Anyway, I really loved this movie. I thought it was great. Loved the writing, loved the pacing, loved the experience. So check this one out whenever you can. I'm not sure when it's getting a wide release, but keep an eye out for it because it was a lot of fun. And I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10. It's closer to an 8 than a 6. Another film I saw was Aggro Dr1ft, or Aggro Drift, I guess. I don't know if they're intending on making a sequel. I don't know. This is the newest film from experimental director slash weirdo Harmony Korine. Now, I've seen every single one of Harmony Korine's feature-length films, and I can't say that his movies are amazing, but at the very least, they're unique and interesting, except for The Beach Bum. That one just doesn't really feel that reflective of his filmography. Maybe I should watch it again, I don't know. To sum up my feelings on Harmony Korine, he's probably my favorite director that I've never given a single one of his films anything higher than a 6 out of 10. If he releases something, I'll watch it, and I certainly don't expect to be seeing any kind of masterpiece, or even a good film, or even a film. This newest film is experimental to say the least, and maybe also to say the most. They used NASA thermal imaging cameras, so everything is heat vision, and you can never really tell if it's daytime or nighttime. The whole movie is shot like this. There's a very video gamey quality to it. Some of the imagery reminded me of Suda 51 games. There's some parts of the movie where they use AI as an assisted tool to make it look weirder, but it feels like very old AI technology. Like, this is back when Google Dreams had their thing, when everything just looked like a dog, except now it's skeletons. There's a very intentionally otherworldly quality to this film, and I do have to admit it is visually interesting, but unfortunately the novelty does wear off after about 20 minutes, and perhaps this could have been avoided if the entire 80-minute film wasn't just showing us the same things over and over and over again for 80 minutes. Like, plot-wise, nothing happens. It's just a bunch of characters insisting their roles, and they insist these things over and over, and it's intentional with how it's repeated, and Harmony Korine has said that he was trying to make something that felt video gamey. It honestly kind of reminded me of Neil Breen, like how in Fateful Findings he's constantly saying, I am hacking into the government to expose their secrets, and the things I am hacking are so powerful and it'll change the world. And he just insists that throughout the entire movie, and that's what the movie is.
I've hacked into just about all the information I need. They have no idea.
In Aggro Drift, he is insisting that he is the world's greatest assassin, and he just keeps saying, I am the world's greatest assassin. And then sometimes we see a guy wearing like a devil mask, and he's a bigger guy, and he has a sword, and he says, I am a great and powerful demon. And sometimes he air humps the sword, and you just hear him go, ah, ah, ah. A lot of the repetitive dialogue feels like it's kind of broken English, as though it was sent through a translator and put into a Japanese game and then translated back to English. A lot of this movie felt really lazy, like it honestly might have been filmed in a day. It seems like Harmony Korine just invited some friends over to cosplay and just hang out and party at a mansion and on a boat, and there's butt shaking and they stand around holding guns trying to look cool. There's some LARPing. It's a lot of really unnatural posing for the camera type stuff. Seemed like they just filmed themselves dicking around and decided that they would figure it out in the editing process. During the Q&A, Harmony Korine mentioned that the composer for the film never actually watched it and that he just texted Harmony the loops. And I do kind of like the soundtrack, but it does feel way too loopy. It's a really interesting vibe. It's kind of aggressive sounding, but every track, it's just like a 10-second loop that plays on forever. It's a lot of that and posing with guns and people saying that they're the world's best assassin. Just one guy saying that over and over again throughout the entire film. He's the greatest, and he's such a great assassin that he's just talks about how great he is as an assassin. That's what assassins mostly do. It's not assassinating, it's just talking about how you are the world's greatest assassin. They pose with some friends, and the friends have the guns, and one of them just kind of shoots it next to the other guy's face, and it would probably make him deaf, but since since it's not actually happening, and I guess Harmony Korine didn't care to make it seem realistic or anything, or maybe that's not the point, and he's just actively trying to make it seem stupid. It's just an effect, and it looks like the guy is not shooting the gun, and they're just playing pretend with some toys in their backyard. They might as well be 10 years old. This might as well just have been a group of friends in elementary school. They found a camera, and they're learning editing software for the first time, and they made a video that's too long. Honestly, this would have functioned perfectly fine as a music video. Just make a Death Grips music video. You know, this could have worked for a band like Death Grips. There's really no point to it being a film. It is a lot of build-up while being anticlimactic, and not even satisfyingly anticlimactic, like not even shitpostingly anticlimactic. Like they almost think that they're doing something cool, which kind of makes it even more unsatisfying. It's kind of weird. Later at the festival, I showed Alex from IHE a video that was on my favorites list on my phone, and he mentioned that the shitpost video that we were watching probably took a lot more time and effort and coordination and talent than Aggro Dr1ft. And he's probably right about that. This video probably took longer to film and has more ideas and passion going into it. And this video is less than 90 seconds long. Back it up. Hey, can we get some ice and look on back it up? I don't know what Harmony Korine was trying to do. It could just be a massive troll movie. I love that he did this because it's funny to talk about. And honestly, out of every movie that we saw at the festival, people were talking about this one the most. And there were other bad movies that people saw at the festival. I heard Pool Man sucked. I didn't want to watch that because it didn't seem like it would be good, but I heard a lot of people were disappointed in that one for some reason. But everybody I talked to had something to say about Aggro Drift. Some people loved it. Some people just enjoyed it as a shitpost. Alex and I saw the Midnight Madness screening, which made it extra fun. Half of the people there were drunk. People were cheering and laughing, and some people just got up and left. At the end of the film, someone loudly stormed out and said, "Worst movie at TIFF," which is not even true, even if you hated the movie. Even if you thought it was like the worst movie of the year. There's no way it's the worst movie at TIFF. Like, you haven't seen every movie at TIFF. Wasn't Dashcam at TIFF? Dashcam is a way worse movie than this. And don't get me wrong, I love the programming at TIFF. It's one of the reasons why it's my favorite film festival anywhere. But there's a variety of different experiences that you could get, and I don't think that this is the worst. It's only 80 minutes long. Sure, it felt longer than that. I'd have to imagine that most people that were disappointed by this movie weren't familiar with Harmony Korine's other films. The guy just clearly likes being a weirdo. I guess I should also mention that the marketing for this movie is a little weird. There's talks about it being what comes after movies, like they've invented something new, like, oh, this is the future of movies or something. I don't know how serious Harmony actually is about that. I don't know how earnestly they're actually trying to sell that idea in the marketing. So if you believe them at face value, then I could imagine being a bit disappointed by this in that sense. But I got pretty much what I expected, despite it being a new experience from Harmony Korine. This was like a different flavor of trash humpers and not as interesting, and certainly a lot lazier, but it's somewhere near that in terms of pushing the boundaries of what even constitutes as a film. Travis Scott was in this movie for some reason. He was the only one whose lines were not dubbed over. He's on a boat and he's saying things like, "Get up, do it. Go to sleep, do it. Then while you're asleep, still doing it." Nothing makes any sense. Sometimes there's a Satan in the sky, and it was kind of unclear as to whether or not the Satan in the sky was kind of the same Satan as the guy just wearing the Satan-esque mask. The one who said that he was a great and powerful demon, but was spending most of his time just air humping a sword. Even though the Midnight Madness screening was the correct choice and people were generally having fun, it seemed like the energy of the crowd died down after about 20 minutes once everybody kind of got numb to it. It wasn't really showing anything new. It was just kind of repeating the same stuff over and 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 over again. So Yeah, it's, I don't know what it is. It's something. And I honestly really enjoyed that he gave everyone something to talk about like this. Throughout the festival and after it had ended, I think about Aggro Dr1ft more than any of the other films I've seen. It definitely left an impression on me, and that's a lot more than I can say about most films. Technically, he created something, and that's pretty cool. So bravo, Harmony. Whatever you do next is certainly a thing that you will be doing next. Watch it, don't watch it, go to sleep, do it, still sleeping, watch it, do it, maybe don't do it, and I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10. Another film I watched is the new Alexander Payne film, The Holdovers. This is the same director as films like Election, About Schmidt, Sideways, The Descendants, Nebraska, and Downsizing. I remember enjoying Sideways when I watched it. I don't remember anything about The Descendants. I haven't seen Election or About Schmidt. I thought Nebraska was very unspecial and forgettable, and I don't know why it was nominated for so many Oscars. And I didn't watch Downsizing, but I'm kind of morbidly curious about it because the only thing that I've ever heard anyone say about it is that it's awful. When the trailer came out for The Holdovers, I thought it looked pretty promising. You can actually see me react to the trailer on the YMS Highlights channel right here. You should check that out and subscribe and hit the bell and all that shit. Paul Giamatti is a pretty great actor and he's always fun to watch. I also really enjoy the older 1970s look and style of the film. The performances throughout this movie are really good. There are some really competent younger actors as well. It was decently funny, I guess, nothing particularly hilarious, but it did have a good sense of humor overall. However, the movie's biggest problem is that it is the most formulated and cliched and paint-by-numbers story, to the point of it feeling manipulative and insincere. Like, the emotions just feel phony after a while. There are so many moments and scenes that had me rolling my eyes. The way in which sappy and sentimental-sounding sad guitar and piano songs would enter the film was just so fucking obvious. Like, you can actually predict when they're going to show up. It's honestly just Oscar bait. All you need to do is just watch the first 20 or 30 minutes of the film, and then you can shut it off because you already know exactly how the rest of the film is going to go. You can just imagine the rest of it, and it will be 100% accurate. There is absolutely no point in experiencing the majority of this film. And with a 2-hour and 13-minute long runtime, I just wanted this movie to end so many times, and they could have, and they didn't, and they just kept going for no reason. They had already explored everything they could possibly explore, and they just keep going. It's not doing anything new. It's not doing anything at all. What you see is what you get, and you will forget about this movie pretty much immediately after you're done watching it. And this is not a bad movie to the point of it being interesting or fun to make fun of. It's just fucking boring. It doesn't need to exist. There are a billion movies exactly like this, minus the intentional 70s style of filmmaking, I guess. It is absolutely pointless, but at the end of the day, I guess it's a safe movie to show people that don't really want to be challenged by anything and have a sort of dependent experience, something comfortable and familiar that they can rely on to just waste time in their day. There were also way too many points in this movie that were obvious product placements for different alcohol brands. The labels are constantly cheated towards the camera, and they even have lines in the script where the characters are just saying the advertising slogans. Like, they actually say Miller High Life, it's the champagne of beers, and they pretend to be ironic about it, but it's not fucking Wayne's World. You're just actually doing it. This isn't parody or satire, and repeating it throughout the film doesn't suddenly make it funny. You're just doing a product placement. It was cringeworthy and annoying. Anyway, like I said, most of the movie is not bad. It's just fine. It's just forgettable. It just doesn't need to exist. It's boring. I don't want to watch movies like this. Just show me something interesting. Show me Aggro Dr1ft. So check this one out if you want. These movies are kind of a pet peeve for me, so chances are you might not be nearly as irritated by these types of films as I am. I wasn't huge on Nebraska either, so if you loved that, then maybe you'll love this. this. I don't know, they're different, I guess. I don't really remember much about that movie either, other than it was boring. Anyway, I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10. Thank you. Another film I saw was the newest from writer-director Michel Franco called Memory. The film stars Jessica Chastain and Peter Sarsgaard, who won Best Actor at Venice for this film. Now, Michel Franco is a director who I've always found pretty interesting. I absolutely loved his film Chronic with Tim Roth, and even though the rest of his films aren't perfect, there's something interesting about his approach to storytelling that I really like. This newest film, Memory, was very well acted, but the writing was kind of confusing to me. There was not a single character in the entire film that was relatable or that I could understand why they're doing anything that they do in the film, and it really misses the opportunity to be an interesting character study because it's absolutely incomprehensible why any character is doing anything the entire movie. Their actions and choices don't feel justified. It's unfortunately just not that interesting if I can't even understand how a character thinks. The script overall is confusing in the sense that I'm not really sure what anyone's supposed to get out of the experience of the film. Is it trying to say anything? What's the point of any of this? It's honestly very impressive that Jessica Chastain manages to pull a great performance from this character. She honestly deserves a lot of credit for that because I don't know what anyone else would have done with it. I watched the movie and I don't really know what the fuck she's supposed to be, so props to Jessica. Now, despite the two lead performances being great, there is unfortunately a younger actor who is prominently in the film that just keeps dragging it down. The teenage acting is bad. Their delivery of the dialogue is unbearably clunky. In some ways, I applaud this movie for being kind of different. It's not exactly predictable, but somehow at the same time, it still feels as though Michel Franco is just kind of going through the motions. It definitely feels like one of his films, but the entire experience was mostly forgettable. I'll probably watch this one again sometime in the future, maybe, I'm not sure. Perhaps I'll get something more out of it on a second watch. Perhaps there will be more to pick up understanding what the story ultimately winds up being. I definitely got something out of this movie, but I'm not really sure what that was. So check this one out if you want. I am kind of confused by the whole experience. And check out Chronic from 2015 if you haven't already. I thought that movie was pretty fantastic. As for this one, I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. Another film I saw was an animated movie called Robot Dreams. Now, this is a Spanish and French production, but the film has no dialogue. So the comedy within this film is mostly physical and it's pretty universal. The story is set in New York City in the 1980s, and much of this film feels like a love letter to that setting. There's great animation throughout the film, and occasionally there's some clever animation concepts as well. I really loved the sound design in this film, not just the Foley, but also the atmospheric sounds. I really loved the subtleties like quiet nose breathing. It doesn't seem like much, but it adds a lot of auditory texture to the scene. Now, the tone and emotion and vibes of this film are super effective at what they set out to do. The intended emotions of the film are ones that I feel, and believe it or not, my favorite sequences in this film are the feel-good scenes. They were very cute and stress-free. It was a great mood booster, just fantastically cute and sweet and heartwarming, and honestly, I would have been ecstatic to have a movie that was basically just only that, but unfortunately this film had other ideas in mind. There was conflict and mild tragedy, and again, I was feeling the emotions that were intended, but I guess I'm just kind of disappointed that they didn't write the story the way I wanted them to. It's a really well-made movie, and I genuinely care about the things that are happening in the movie, but in terms of what it set out to do narratively, it was kind of unsatisfying. Not in a lazy way, but in a way where I was just thinking, do this, just do this, please, the story, this needs to happen, and they decided to do other things, and it worked emotionally, it did what it wanted to do, but I almost feel like I missed out on an alternate version of this movie where it gave me the things that I wanted. Also, I don't understand why this was a 1 hour and 42 minute long feature. In terms of what it accomplished narratively, this easily could have been a short, and don't get me wrong, it was very entertaining and enjoyable overall, but there are definitely scenes that could have been cut from the film without it affecting anything. There was definitely at least one part in the movie where I started thinking, why are we seeing this right now? Who cares about this character? Why aren't we getting back to the thing that the movie is about? But still, overall, it was a very enjoyable experience that I would recommend. At the end of the day, it created something interesting with characters and stakes that I actually cared about, and I will definitely be seeing this film again at some point. Apparently Neon is releasing this in some way on November 22nd, according to IMDb. I couldn't really find much information on this. So check this one out whenever you can, and I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10. Another film I saw was Four Daughters from Tunisian director Kather Ben-Hania. This is the same director as a film called The Man Who Sold His Skin, which I very much enjoyed. In this film, she changes gears to create a hybrid documentary, where it's a documentary, but they're also making a film, but it's also about making the film, and the people in the film are the real people that they're portraying, except some of them are actors. I'm making it sound a lot more complicated than it actually is, and the film does a great job communicating itself. In some ways, it's kind of similar to Abbas Kiarostami's Close-Up, but it's still very much its own thing. This film makes for a pretty fascinating study of several characters. They are interesting to follow, and it feels like we get a really genuine window into their lives. It's a pretty fascinating film both intellectually and culturally. There's scenes where they act and recreate events from their own lives, and it's as if the film itself is an excuse for them to air out their grievances. This film serves as a pretty fantastic exploration of addressing past traumas and reopening old wounds. This film is mostly just talking, but it results in some pretty great conversations and compelling scenes. I found it really interesting to see the generational differences between Tunisian women on ownership of women's bodies. It's a very substantive film that often feels emotional and meaningful. My biggest problem with this film is that the tone of some of the editing and some of the music coming together felt a bit cheesy at points. It wasn't super often, and the music was sparingly used, but there are some transitionary sequences that tried to feel super serious and scary and just wound up feeling cliched with many overdone sound cues. Again, this didn't happen often, and some of the music in this film is really great. Just a small issue in a film that otherwise knows exactly what it is. I also feel as though this movie probably could have been maybe 15 minutes shorter. It was a bit slower paced than it needed to be, but I still got a great experience out of this film overall. Overall, this was a captivating film with an incredibly strong final sequence. I definitely recommend this film, so check it out whenever you can. It looks like it's getting a limited US release on October 27th, and I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10. Another film I saw was About Dry Grasses. This is the newest film from Turkish director Nuri Bilge Ceylan. Again, I'm trying my best. I think that might be somewhat accurate. I have no idea. They are often very long and slow-paced, but the sheer talent and meticulous craftsmanship that goes into his films keeps the experience really engaging. Many of his films are classified as slow cinema, but despite their length and pace, they do not feel like a waste of time. There is so much going into each shot in his films that I'm constantly able to appreciate and pick things out of the frame. The cinematography in his films is just absolutely beautiful and breathtaking. The framing and lighting is incredible. The scenery is beautifully captured and really adds to the atmosphere of the film. The setting and weather often feel like characters themselves. You can really feel the cold in this film. It is such an immaculate character piece of environment. Even when he shoots indoors, the frame is always packed with genuine things to appreciate. The interior sets feel real and lived in. The set decorations are incredible, and there is so much to absorb as they essentially tell a story of their own. I also genuinely love the choices he makes in terms of how things are shown. There is a clear, intelligent purpose to the order of how visuals are revealed in this film, and it is through these choices that we can really see the purpose of these long takes and its slow style. When a scene plays out from a particular angle that you get used to, and after a good chunk of time another angle is shown and reveals more about the scene, it's a really intelligent way to recontextualize what we were just seeing. Feeling the length of a character walking towards the camera and then revealing how much of his journey is still left to go. It's a very smart choice. The pacing doesn't feel purposeless, and the visuals and atmosphere are just incredible. Every performance in this film is fantastic, with the female lead taking home Best Actress at Cannes for this film. There are also several child characters in this film, and each of their performances is super great and natural. The writing in this film is also fantastic. When characters talk or discuss things or argue with each other, it always feels like they're genuinely real, different people. It never feels like it's just the writer debating himself or coming up with weird, inaccurate strawman perspectives. When characters disagree with each other in the film, you can tell that the writer has a genuine understanding of where these characters are coming from. There is such an acute understanding of not just how people talk, but how people think. It takes a lot of talent to be able to capture something like that, and especially to present it in a film where there is so much going into every other aspect as well. This is one of the best living directors right now, and his talent is undeniable. This is proof that a film can be undeniably long and slow, but still so engaging. For many of these scenes, I was essentially glued to the screen. The strong dialogue, fantastic acting, and beautiful imagery had me in the scenes completely. Anyway, I really loved this film. This is one of my favorite directors. If you want to see what his other movies are like, I would recommend Winter Sleep. So check this one out whenever you can. I'm not sure exactly when it's going to get a wide release, but it'll be available at some point. This film gave me a lot to think about, and I will definitely be seeing this one again. And I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10. It's closer to a 9 than a 7. And the last film I saw at Toronto Film Festival 2023 was Close Your Eyes. This is a Spanish slow burn mystery drama where an actor disappears during the filming of a movie and no one knows where he went. Overall, this is a very well directed and professionally presented film. The whole film looks great, and I love the lighting and color grading. And because there's a film within the film, we can see that this director is pretty great at capturing different styles. There was good music throughout. Each of the characters in this film have a very strong screen presence, and it really helps with the pacing of the film. It's 2 hours and 49 minutes long, and although I did feel the length, it was not boring. One of my issues with this film is a particular scene where someone is playing guitar and singing, and narratively I really enjoyed the inclusion of this scene, but the way it was shot and edited just felt so amateur. The shots were really stagnant, and they would cut back and forth from A to B cameras exactly on cue from when each character was whistling. Just A to B and A to B for a really long time. It felt way too standardized, boring, and uncreative, and the cuts were so frequent that it was really messing with the tone of the scene. It was really bizarre. I don't know what they were going for. It was the only scene that was like this, so whatever. I also felt as though narratively this film didn't really live up to its full potential. Like I said, it was really well made and interesting, but despite the nearly 3-hour runtime, it didn't really explore all that much. Considering the subject and the pacing and the presentation, this is the kind of film where I'd want and expect to be contemplating its ideas after the credits, and it kind of pretends to be that type of movie, as some things are left open-ended. Not everything is explained, so there are technically some questions you could be asking, but there's really nothing about those particular questions that matters or affects anything. So what you're left with is a film that's really interesting and well made, but you're kind of just done with as soon as it's over. Like, that was nice, but I have no reason to be thinking about it. It was an enjoyable experience, but it really left me wanting something more. I don't really have much else to say about this film, but I will likely see it again at some point. So if this looks interesting to you, then check it out whenever you can. And I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10. It's closer to a 6 than an 8. Alright, that does it for the 2023 Toronto International Film Festival. Stay tuned for more reviews and things. Thank you.